Good morning. This is Sunday, September 9th, 2018 at 8:53 a.m. Pacific time. Last week I messed it up. I did Bible chapter by chapter on Sunday and I did Joyce Meyer on Wednesday. So I'm back to our normal. Sunday is Joyce Meyer, Battlefield of the Mind, and I actually have it on Kindle now, as you can see. And we are on part 3, Wilderness Mentalities. Introduction. It is only 11 days journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea on Canaan's border, yet Israel took 40 years to get beyond it. Deuteronomy 1:2. The people of the nation of Israel wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years, making what was actually an 11-day journey. Why? Was it their enemies, their circumstances, the trials along the way, or something entirely different that prevented them from arriving at their destination? As I was pondering this situation, God gave me a powerful revelation that has helped me personally as well as thousands of others. The Lord said to me, the children of Israel spent 40 years in the wilderness, making an 11-day trip because they had a wilderness mentality. Have you stayed here long enough? The Lord our God said to us in Horeb, you have dwelt long enough on this mountain. Deuteronomy 1:6. We really shouldn't look at the Israelites with much astonishment because most of us do the same thing they did. We keep going around and around the same mountains instead of making progress. The result is it takes us years to experience victory over something that could have and should have been dealt with quickly. I think the Lord is saying the same thing to you and me today that he said to the children of Israel in their day. You have dwelt long enough on the same mountain. It is time to move on. Set your mind and keep it set. And set your minds and keep them set on what is above, the higher things, not on the things that are on the earth. Colossians 3:2. God showed me 10 wilderness mentalities that the Israelites had that kept them in the wilderness. A wilderness mentality is a wrong mindset. We can have right or wrong mindsets. The right ones benefit us. The wrong ones hurt us and hinder our progress. Colossians 3:2 teaches us to set our minds and keep them set. We keep our mind set on the right direction. Wrong mindsets not only affect our circumstances, but they also affect our inner life. Some people have a wilderness type life because they are a wilderness. There was a time when my circumstances were not really bad, but I could not enjoy anything in my life because I was a wilderness inside. Dave and I had a nice home, 4 lovely children, good jobs, and enough money to live comfortably. I could not enjoy our blessings because I had several wilderness mentalities. My life appeared to me to be a wilderness because that is the way I saw everything. Some people see things negatively because they have experienced unhappy circumstances all their lives and can't imagine anything getting any better. Then there are some people who see everything as bad and negative simply because that is the way they are on the inside. Whatever is the cause, a negative outlook leaves a person miserable and unlikely of making any progress toward the promised land. God had called the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt to go to the land he had promised to give them as a perpetual inheritance, a land that flowed with milk and honey and every good thing that they could imagine, a land in which there would be no shortage of anything they needed, a land of prosperity in every realm in their existence. But most of the generation that the Lord called out of Egypt never entered into the promised land. Instead, they died in the wilderness. To me, this is one of the saddest things that can happen to a child of God, to have so much available and yet never be able to enjoy any of it. I was one of those people for many years of my Christian life. I was on my way to heaven, but I was not enjoying the trip. I was miserable in the wilderness, but thank God for his mercy. A light shone in my darkness, and he led me out. I pray that this section of the book will be a light to you and prepare you to walk out of your wilderness into the glorious light of God's marvelous kingdom. Chapter 16. My future is determined by my past and present. Wilderness mentality number 1. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Proverbs 29:18. The Israelites had no positive vision for their lives, no dreams. They knew where they came from, but they did not know where they were going. Everything was based on what they had seen and could see. They did not know how to see with the eye of faith, anointed to bring deliverance. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Luke 4:18 and 19. I come from a background of abuse. I was raised in a dysfunctional home. My childhood was filled with fear and torment. The experts say that a child's personality is formed within the first 5 years of his life. My personality was a mess. I lived in pretense behind walls of protection that I had built to keep people from hurting me. I was locking others out, but I was locking myself in. I was a controller. So filled with fear that the only way I could face life was to feel that I was in control. Then no one could hurt me. As a young adult trying to live for Christ and follow the Christian lifestyle, I knew where I had come from, but I did not know where I was going. I felt that my future would always be marred by my past. I thought, how could anyone who has the kind of past I do ever be really all right? It's impossible. However, Jesus said that he came to make well those who were sick, broken-hearted, wounded, and bruised, those broken down by calamity. Jesus came to open the prison doors and set the captives free. I did not make any progress until I started to believe that I could be set free. I had to have a positive vision for my life. I had to believe that my future was not determined by my past or even my present. You may have had a miserable past. You may even be in current circumstances that are very negative and depressing. You may be facing situations that are so bad, it seems that you have no real reason for hope. But I say to you, boldly, your future is not determined by your past or present. Get a new mindset. Believe that God that with God all things are possible. See Luke 18:27. With man, some things may be impossible, but we serve a God who created everything we see out of nothing. See Hebrews 11:3. Give him your nothingness and watch him go to work. All he needs is your faith in him. He needs for you to believe, and he will do the rest. Eyes to see, ears to hear. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and shall make him a quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge after the sight of the eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. Isaiah 11:1-3. We cannot judge things accurately by the sight of our eyes. We must have spiritual eyes to see and ears to hear. We need to hear what the Spirit says, not what the world says. Let God speak to you about your future, not everyone else. The Israelites continually looked at and talked about the way things were. God brought them out of Egypt by the hand of Moses, talking to them through him about the promised land. He wanted them to keep their eyes on where they were going and off of where they had been. Let's look at a few scriptures that clearly depict their wrong attitude. What is the problem? All the Israelites grumbled and deplored their situation, accused Moses and Aaron, to whom the whole congregation said, Would that we had died in Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Why does the Lord bring us to this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and little ones will be prey. Is it not better for us to return to Egypt? Numbers 14:2-3. I encourage you to look over this passage carefully. Notice how negative these people were, complaining, ready to give up easily, preferring to go back to bondage rather than press through the wilderness into the promised land. Actually, they did not have a problem. They were the problem. Bad thoughts produce bad attitudes. Now there was no water for the congregation, and they assembled together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and said, Would that we had died when our brethren died in the plague before the Lord. And why have you brought up the congregation of the Lord into the wilderness that we should die here, we and our livestock? Numbers 20:2-4. It is easy to see from their own words that the Israelites were not trusting God at all. They had negative failure attitude. They decided they would fail before they ever really got started, simply because every circumstance was not perfect. They displayed an attitude that came from a wrong mindset. Bad attitudes are the fruit of bad thoughts. A lack of an attitude of gratitude. And they journeyed from Mount Hor by the way to the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. And the people became impatient, depressed, much discouraged because of the trials of the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. They have brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness, for there is no bread, neither is there any water, and we loathe this light, contemptible, unsubstantial manna. Numbers 21:4-5. Along with all the other Bad attitudes we have already seen in the previous scriptures. In this passage, we see evidence in the Israelites of a tremendous lack of gratitude. The children of Israel simply could not quit thinking about where they had come from and where they were long enough to get and where they were long enough to get where they were going. It would have helped them to consider their forefather Abraham. He went through some disappointing experiences in his life, but he did not allow them to negatively affect his future. No life was strife, and there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling then in the land, making fodder more difficult to obtain. So Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife, I beg of you, between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself, I beg you, from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if you choose the right hand, then I will go to the left." And Lot looked and saw that everywhere the Jordan Valley was well watered, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was all like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go to Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and he traveled east, so they separated. Genesis 13:7 through 11. Abraham knew the dangers of living in strife. Therefore, he told Lot that they needed to separate. In order to walk in love and to ensure that there would be no strife between them in the future, Abraham allowed his nephew to choose which valley he wanted first. Lot chose the best one, the Jordan Valley, and they separated. We must remember that Lot had nothing until Abraham blessed him. Think of the attitude that Abraham could have had, but chose not to. He knew that if he acted properly, God would take care of him. Lift up your eyes and look, the Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had left him. Lift up now your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give to you and to your posterity forever. Genesis 13:14 and 15. This passage clearly reveals that even though Abraham himself, in less desirable circumstances after his separation from his nephew, God wanted him to look up from the place where he was to the place that he wanted to take him. Abraham had a good attitude about his situation, and as a result, the devil could not keep the blessings of God from him. God gave him even more possessions than he had enjoyed before the separation, and blessed him mightily in every way. I encourage you to take a positive look at the possibilities of the future and begin to calleth those things which be not as though they were. Romans 4:17. Think and speak about your future in a positive way, according to what God has placed in your heart, and not according to what you have seen in the past or are seeing even now in the present. Okay, that's the end of chapter 16. Thank you for listening and reading with me. And I will read chapter 17 next week on Sunday. Have a great week.